Hi everyone, in this episode we're going to be adding the ability to create multiple shapes, like so, and we should be able to jump between editing any of these shapes very easily. Alright, let's go to the Shape Creator class, and here we've got our list of vector 3s for all of the points in a shape. So it makes sense that if we want to have multiple shapes, we could just have a list of vector 3s. However, Unity currently doesn't support the serialization of lists, so we wouldn't be able to save that data. To get around that, we're going to create a public class called shape, and this shape class is going to hold our points list, and we're going to mark the class as being serializable with this system.serializable attribute, and over here we can just now make a public list of shapes, which I'll set equal to a new list of shapes. So in this sort of roundabout way, we've managed to get the list of lists that we wanted. Alright, let's save that and go into the shape editor class, where we now of course have loads of errors waiting for us. Let's start with the draw method here. So you're going to want to loop through all of the shapes. So I'll make a for loop for int shape index, starting at 0 while shape index is less than shapecreator.shapes.count, then increment shape index by 1, and I'm going to put all of this stuff inside that loop. Then we can say shape, I'll call this shape to draw, is equal to shapecreator.shapes with an index of that shape index, and then we'll have to adjust some of these things. So instead of shapecreator.points.count, we've now got shape to draw.points.count. Let me just copy this name, shape to draw, so I can basically replace shape creator with shape to draw in all of these instances here, like so. And now the draw method should be relatively happy. Let me copy this for loop here, because we're going to need it again in the update mouse over info method. So here we'll want to copy that in, place all of that inside of the loop, and instead of shape to draw, let me call this something more sensible in the context. I'll just call it current shape. Alright, and then just replace shape creator with current shape. And let me copy this here. And we're going to want to do this once again for this line check loop. So I'll paste that in. And once again, replace shape creator with current shape. Alright, so I think that method is now happy as well. So we can move on to the next method that has some errors, which is this handle left mouse drag method. And here we want to get the points from the currently selected shape, and currently we don't have any way of knowing what that is. So let's go down to selection info and create a public int. I'll call this selected shape index. And then just as a little shortcut, I'll make a shape accessor here, call this the selected shape, and in its get block, we'll just return shape creator dot shapes with an index of selection info dot selected shape index. Alright, so coming up to this handle left mouse drag method, I can now say simply selected shape dot points blah blah blah. So let me copy selected shape, because that's how we're going to fix all of these other ones in the other input methods as well. Just replacing shape creator with selected shape. I think there's one more error just over here. Okay, so now we have no more errors left, but of course things aren't going to quite be working yet. First of all, there's currently no way to create a shape, so the shapes list is just always going to be empty. So let's create a method called create new shape. And this will just say shapecreator.shapes.add, and we'll add a new shape object to that list. We'll want that new shape to be selected by default. So let's say selectioninfo.selectedShapeIndex is equal to the index of that new shape that we just added to the end of the list. So we can of course get that index by saying shapecreator.shapes.count -1. And we might as well add the ability to undo any new shapes that we create. So we can say undo.recordObject. We'll record the shape creator object, and I'll just call this action createShape. Okay, so now we need to figure out when we want to actually call this method. So you can imagine that the first time that the user left-clicks in the scene, there may be no shapes in the shape list. So let's go to the handle left mouse down method and just say that if that's the case, so if shapecreator.shapes.count is equal to 0, then we're going to want to just automatically create a new shape. But then subsequently, let's say that if the user wants to create a new shape, they'll have to shift left click in the scene. So I'm going to create a method here, void handle shift left mouse down. So we'll take in vector 3 mouse position. And let's call this, I'll just copy this handle left mouse down code here. And instead of saying GUI event modifiers is equal to none, we'll say if it's equal to shift. Okay, so here we'll say create new shape. After shift left clicking to create a new shape, I think one would expect it to also add in a new point at that location. So we now want to run this sort of create point code over here. But of course, it's a bit tricky because it's all tied up in our handle left mouse down method. So we'll want to separate this logic out into a separate method. So let me cut that out. And over here, just below create new shape, I'll create a void create new point. And this will take in a vector 3 position. And we can just paste this stuff in. And instead of mouse position, we now use position. All right, and let's also say needs repaint is equal to true. And whenever we create a new point, we also want that point to be automatically selected. So let's have a separate method here called select point under mouse. And this will just say selectioninfo.point is selected is true. And we can also say that mouse is over point is true. And because a point is selected, let's just make sure that a line can no longer be selected. So I'll say selectioninfo.mouse is over line is false, and selectioninfo.lineindex is -1. We'll also want to set selectioninfo.position at start of drag equal to the position of the currently selected point. So that would be selected shape dot points with an index of selectioninfo.pointIndex. Finally, we can just say needs repaint is true. So when we create a new point, we'll call select point under mouse immediately. And then in the handle shift left mouse down method, after we create a new shape, we'll ask it to also create a new point at the mouse position. And in our regular handle left mouse down method, we can say that if selectioninfo.mouse is over point, then we simply want to select the point under the mouse. Otherwise, we will create new point, passing in the mouse position, and we no longer need the rest of the stuff. Alright, I realized I made a small mistake earlier, which is just that I'm still calling handle left mouse down in this shift case, where I of course want to call handle shift left mouse down. And while we're here, just for this handle left mouse up, I actually don't care what modifiers are held down, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, let's save this and go into Unity to see where things stand at the moment. So on the shape creator game object, I'm going to left click to automatically create a new shape and place a point. And now to make a new shape manually, I'll hold down Shift and left click, and that will create this new shape here, and we can start adding in points for it. And I'll do that once again. Okay, now first thing we notice, of course, is that when I'm hovering over a point, the corresponding point in each of the shapes is being selected. So let's go back into the shape editor, and in the draw method, we'll want to know if the current shape that we're drawing is the selected shape. So we can create a bool, shape is selected, which is true if the current shape index is the same as our selection info dot selected shape index. Then I'm also going to define a color here called the deselected shape color. And I'm just going to set this equal to color.gray. So I want to draw all of the points and lines of the non-selected shapes just in a single color, this deselected shape color. So over here where we're drawing the lines, let's say that a line can only be selected if it's part of the selected shape. So I'll say and shape is selected. Alright, otherwise, if this is either not a selected shape or just the line isn't selected, then I'm going to say that if shape is selected, then we'll draw it in its usual black. Otherwise, I'm going to draw it in the deselected shape color. Then I'm going to do the same thing here for the points. So here I'll add and shape is selected. And here I'll say if shape is selected, then draw it in white. Otherwise, draw it in the deselected shape color. Okay, let me save and go into Unity. So now this is looking a little bit better. We've got our selected shape here, which we can interact with, and the other two shapes are grayed out. But if I hover my mouse over this point, for example, it's still going to highlight the corresponding point on the selected shape. So that's a bit weird. What I'd ideally like is that even on a grayed out shape, if I actually hover over that point or that line, then it will highlight just that point or line on the grayed out shape. And then if I click on it, this will actually become the selected shape. So how to achieve this? First of all, in the selection info class, we're going to need another bit of information, a public int for which shape the mouse is currently over. So I'll call this the mouse over shape index. We will be setting that in the update mouse over info method. So just like we've got mouse over point index here, let's add an int mouse over shape index, defaulted to -1. And whenever the mouse goes over a point, we can also say mouse over shape index is equal to the current shape index, referring to the shape index in this loop up here. Alright, so now in this if statement, we're saying if mouse over point index is not equal to the selection info point index, and we'll say or the mouse over shape index is not equal to selection info dot mouse over shape index. And we'll want to set selection info dot mouse over shape index equal to the mouse over shape index that we've just calculated. The same thing is going to apply for the lines. So if we found a new closest line index, we can say mouse over shape index is equal to the shape index. And just like we did a moment ago, we'll here also say or the mouse over shape index is not equal to selection info dot mouse over shape index. and we'll set it selectioninfo.mouse over shape index is equal to mouse over shape index. Okay, so what can we do with this new bit of information? Well, first of all, in the draw method, we can create another bool, mouse is over shape, and this will be true if the shape index is equal to selectioninfo.mouse over shape index. And when we're deciding whether or not we can show the line in its highlighted color, we don't really care if the shape is selected, we rather care if the mouse is over this current shape. So let's change that over here for the points as well, and mouse is over shape. Alright, so let's save this, go into Unity and see what this is doing now. So once that compiles, we can see this is working here, and we can also highlight the points and lines of the grayed out shapes. Of course, at the moment, what isn't working is if we actually click on, say, this point here, it's just going to interact with the selected shape. So we want to tell it when we click on a new shape, that should become the new selected shape index. So back to the script, and let's come somewhere up here and create a new method called select shape under mouse. And this is going to say that if selectioninfo.mouse over shape index is not equal to -1, then the selected shape index will be set to the selectioninfo.mouse over shape index, and we'll request a repaint. Okay, so whenever we left click, before we go about actually selecting a point or creating a new point, we're going to want to select the shape under the mouse. Alright, finally, whenever we create a new point, we're going to want to say selectioninfo.mouse over shape index is equal to the selected shape index. Alright, let's save this and see how it's doing now. So I'll wait for it to compile, and then we can try interacting with this shape here, and then I'll left click to interact with this other shape, and we can see it's now become selected, and we can try doing things like splitting the line, and that should work as well. Let me shift left click to add in a new shape. That's also working as expected. The one way we might be able to break things a little bit is if I press Command Z a bunch of times to actually undo that shape that I created, and now the selected shape index is going to be equal to a shape that no longer exists. So if I left click, we're going to get an argument out of range exception. So the way we could handle this is by detecting whenever an undo operation is performed. So let's come down to somewhere near the bottom here and create a method called onUndo or redo. And in this method, I'm simply going to say that if the selected shape index is greater than or equal to the number of shapes in the shape creator, then we'll want to set selectioninfo.selectedShapeIndex equal to the index of the last shape in the shapes list. So shapecreator.shapes.count -1. Okay, now in order for this method to actually be called, we need to subscribe it to the undo redo performed event. So just say plus equals on undo or redo here in the onEnable method. And we should also unsubscribe this when it's done. So in the onDisable method, just going to copy this, and instead of plus equals, we of course have minus equals. So with that done, that little bug should be fixed. So if I create a new shape here, press Command Z, we can now see that the last shape becomes automatically selected. So if I left click now, we'll just be interacting with that shape. Alright, now I have found one more bug, which is that if I hover the mouse over a line and then shift left click to add in a new shape, we get this argument out of range exception. So let's go up to the create new point method. And what's happening here is it's saying that the mouse is over a line, and so it's trying to insert a new point based on that line index. But since we've just created a new shape, that line doesn't actually belong to this shape. So what we can do is just create a bool mouse is over selected shape. And this is true if selection info dot mouse over shape index is the same as selection info dot selected shape index. So we only want to insert a new point along the line if the mouse is actually over the selected shape. So if we save that now, we should see that that problem is gone. I'll clear the error there, and shift left click, and we can add in a new shape along a line like that. Okay, that is everything for this episode. So until next time, cheers.